The stars looked different that night. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the sand dune, his eyes scanning the dark sky above the Sahara Desert. Something was wrong. The radio in his hand crackled with static, but no voices came through. He had been trying to contact base for 3 hours now. "Still nothing, sir," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez as she climbed up the dune behind him. Her boots made soft sounds in the sand. She carried her rifle across her back and wore the same desert gear as Morrison. Both of them had been living in this harsh place for 3 months now, learning how to survive where most people would die. Morrison nodded and checked his watch. It was almost midnight. The desert was cold now, but in 6 hours the sun would rise and turn this place into an oven again. He had seen temperatures reach 130 degrees during the day. At night it could drop to 40 degrees. The desert was a killer in both ways. "Wake the others," Morrison said. "Something big is coming." Rodriguez looked up at the sky. She had good eyes. Better than most soldiers. Years of desert training had made her sharp. "What do you think it is, sir?" Before Morrison could answer, the sky exploded with light. Dozens of burning objects streaked across the darkness like falling stars. But these were not stars. These were something else entirely. The objects were too big, too bright, and they were all heading toward the same area. "Get everyone up now," Morrison shouted over the growing noise. The burning objects were getting closer, and the sound they made was like thunder that would not stop. Rodriguez ran toward their small camp. There were 10 other soldiers sleeping in the desert shelters they had built. All of them were part of a special training program. They had volunteered to spend months in the Sahara, learning how to fight and survive in the worst conditions on Earth. Sergeant Ben Parker was the first to wake up. He was a big man with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked like leather. He had been teaching desert survival for 15 years before joining this mission. "What's happening?" he asked as he grabbed his weapon. "Contact," Rodriguez said simply. That was all she needed to say. Every soldier knew what that meant. The burning objects hit the ground about 5 miles away. The impact shook the sand under their feet. Dust clouds rose into the air, and the sound was like 100 trucks crashing at once. Then everything went quiet. Morrison gathered his team on top of the dune. 12 soldiers stood in the cold desert air, watching the dust clouds in the distance. They had been training for 3 months, but nothing had prepared them for this. "Could be a plane crash," said Corporal Lisa Turner. She was their weather expert, a small woman who could read the desert like a book. "Maybe a military test." 12 plane crashes at the same time? Asked Staff Sergeant Carlos Mendez. He was looking through his binoculars at the crash site. "I don't think so." Morrison took the binoculars and looked for himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. The objects were not planes. They were large. Metal pods, and they were opening up. Things were coming out of them. Big things. "Jesus," whispered Sergeant Tony Blake, looking through his own binoculars. "Are those ... aliens?" Morrison finished. "And there's a lot of them." The creatures coming out of the pods were huge. They stood at least 9 feet tall, with dark skin that looked like armor. Even from 5 miles away, Morrison could see that. They moved like predators. They had long arms that ended in claws, and they carried weapons that glowed with strange light. "How many?" Rodriguez asked. Morrison counted the pods. There were at least 50 of them, maybe more. If each pod held 40 or 50 creatures, that meant thousands of aliens had just landed in the Sahara Desert. 2,000, maybe more, Morrison said. And they're all heading this way. The team was quiet for a moment. Everyone understood what this meant. 12 humans against 2,000 aliens. In the middle of the desert, with no backup. "We need to call this in," said Parker. Morrison tried his radio again. Still nothing but static. "Something's jamming our communications. We're on our own." "For how long?" asked Turner. "Base will notice when we miss our check-in tomorrow morning." Morrison said, "Help might come in 8 or 10 hours." "A lot can happen in 8 hours," said Mendez. Morrison looked at his team. These were good soldiers, all of them. They had survived 3 months in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. They knew the desert better than anyone. But they were still just 12 people against an army. "We have two choices," Morrison said. "We can run or we can fight." "Where would we run to?" asked Rodriguez. "The nearest town is 200 miles away. We'd never make it on foot." "And, if we stay?" asked Blake. Morrison looked back at the alien landing site. The creatures were organizing themselves into groups. They moved with military precision like they had done this before. "If we stay, we die, but maybe we can take some of them with us." Parker spat into the sand. "I didn't spend 3 months learning to survive in this hell just to run away from some ugly aliens." "They picked the wrong planet," said Turner. "And the wrong desert," Rodriguez smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Let's show them what humans can do." Morrison felt pride in his team. They were scared, he could see that, but they were not going to run. They were going to fight. "All right," Morrison said. "We know this desert better than anyone. We know where the water is, where the shade is, where the sand is soft and where it's hard. We know how to move at night and how to hide during the day. They don't," he pointed toward the alien camp. "Look at them. They're wearing heavy armor in the desert. When the sun comes up, they're going to cook. They don't know about sandstorms, about flash floods, about the 1,000 ways this place can kill you. So what's the plan?" asked Menendez. Morrison looked at the eastern horizon. The sky was getting lighter. Dawn was coming, and with it the killing heat of the Sahara. "We disappear," Morrison said. "We become ghosts. We hit them when they don't expect it, then we vanish. We let the desert do most of the work for us." "And if it doesn't work?" asked Turner. "Then we die fighting," Morrison said. "But we make sure they remember us." The team began to move. They had practiced this hundreds of times during their training. They broke camp in minutes, burying their supplies and covering their tracks. Within an hour it looked like no one had ever been there. As the sun rose over the Sahara, 12 human soldiers spread out across the desert. They moved like shadows, using every bit of cover the harsh landscape provided. Behind them, 2,000 alien warriors began their march across the sand. The aliens were confident. They had conquered dozens of planets. They had never been defeated. Earth was supposed to be easy. The intelligence report said humans were weak, primitive, and helpless. The aliens were about to learn that intelligence reports could be very wrong. Morrison lay on his belly behind a ridge of sand, watching the alien army through his binoculars. They were moving in straight lines across the desert like they were marching on a parade ground. They had no idea how to move in the sand, how to conserve their energy, how to protect themselves from the sun. "Amateurs," Morrison whispered to himself. The temperature was already climbing. In 2 hours, it would be over 100 degrees. In 4 hours, it would be 120. The aliens in their heavy armor were going to suffer. Morrison smiled. The desert was about to teach these invaders a lesson they would never forget, if they lived long enough to remember it. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the desert began to show its true nature. By 8 in the morning, the temperature had reached 105 degrees. The sand was hot enough to burn skin through boots. The air shimmered with heat waves that made everything look like it was underwater. War Chief Greightall stood inside his command pod, looking at the reports from his scouts. Something was wrong. His warriors were moving slower than expected. Many of them were asking for water breaks every few minutes. Some had even collapsed. "Commander," said his second-in-command, a warrior named Vextar, "the troops are having trouble with the heat. Maybe we should wait until evening to continue." Greightall's eyes burned with anger. He was 9 feet tall with dark armor that covered his entire body. His claws were sharp enough to cut through steel. He had led armies across 20 different worlds, and he had never lost a battle. "We do not wait for weather," he growled. "We are Kethver. We are the strongest warriors in the galaxy. A little heat will not stop us," but it was not a little heat. Outside the command pod, Kethver warriors were suffering like they had never suffered before. Their armor absorbed the sun's rays like a sponge. Inside their suits, the temperature was climbing past 150 degrees. Their breathing was heavy. and their vision was blurring, Warrior Kethjun pulled off his helmet and immediately regretted it. The desert air hit his face like a blast from a furnace. His skin, which was dark blue on his home world, turned purple in the heat. He put his helmet back on, but the damage was done. His face was already burning. This planet is trying to kill? U.S., he said to the warrior next to him. Planets do not kill, said Warrior Mackerel. Only enemies kill. Then this planet is our enemy? Kethjun replied, 5 miles away. Captain Morrison watched the alien army through his binoculars. He was lying under a camouflage net that blocked the sun but let air flow through. He had been in this position for 2 hours, and he was comfortable. The aliens, however, were not. Look at them, he whispered into his radio. They're dropping like flies. I count at least 50 down already, came Rodriguez's voice through his earpiece. She was positioned on a ridge 2 miles to the south, and it's not even noon yet. Morrison smiled. He had spent 3 months learning to survive in this desert. He knew that the key was to respect the heat, not fight it. The aliens were fighting everything about this place, and the desert was winning. Parker, what's your status? Morrison asked. I'm in position, came the reply. Sergeant Ben Parker was the closest to the alien force, only half a mile away. He was hidden in a shallow cave that stayed cool even in the middle of the day. I can see their lead scouts. They're moving, like they're drunk. That's dehydration, Morrison said. Turner, how hot is it going to get? Corporal Lisa Turner was their weather expert. She had been tracking the temperature all morning. It's going to hit 125 today, maybe 130, and there's no wind. No wind means no cooling, Morrison said. Those aliens are cooking in their armor. Should we attack now? Asked Rodriguez. Not yet, Morrison replied. Let the desert soften them up first. We'll hit them when they're weakest. The alien army continued its march across the sand. But what had started as a disciplined force was becoming a struggling mob. Warriors were falling behind, collapsing in the sand. The medics were running out of cooling gel for their suits. Scout Velmer was the first alien to die from the heat. He had been leading a patrol when he suddenly stopped walking. His legs gave out, and he fell face first into the sand. When his squad found him, his armor was too hot to touch. Another one down, reported Vexstar to his commander. That makes 73 casualties from heat exhaustion. Greigtel was becoming worried, but he would not show it. Push forward. He ordered, We will find the humans and end this quickly. But finding the humans was proving impossible. The Kethver had advanced sensors that could detect a mouse from a mile away. In the desert, however, the heat created so many false readings that the sensors were useless. The shimmering air made it impossible to see clearly. The sand reflected their own heat signatures back at them. Sir, said another warrior, the sensors are showing movement everywhere, but when we investigate, there's nothing there. Greigtel did not understand that he was seeing mirages. On his cold home world, the air was always clear. He had never seen heat waves that could make the horizon dance and shimmer. He thought the humans had some kind of cloaking technology. Spread out, he ordered. Find them. This was exactly what Morrison had been waiting for. The aliens were splitting up into smaller groups, making them easier targets. And they were moving during the hottest part of the day, when the heat was most dangerous. All units, this is Morrison, he said into his radio. The enemy is splitting. Up, Parker, you're closest. Take out the lead patrol. Roger that, Parker replied. Ben Parker had been hunting in deserts for most of his life. He knew how to move without making sound, how to use the heat waves to hide his approach, how to strike fast and disappear. He was the perfect ghost in. This landscape. The alien patrol consisted of 5 warriors. They were moving slowly, their weapons ready, but they were tired and confused. The heat was making them dizzy, and their armor was so hot that they could barely think straight. Parker moved like a shadow from rock to rock. He got within 50 feet of the patrol without being seen. Then he raised his rifle and fired. The first shot hit the lead warrior in the chest. The alien's armor was tough, but human bullets were designed to penetrate armor. The warrior fell backward into the sand. The other 4 aliens spun around, trying to find the shooter. But Parker was already gone, moving to a new position. The aliens fired their plasma weapons at empty air, the energy bolts sizzling as they hit the sand. "Where is he?" shouted one of the aliens. "I do not know," replied another. "The heat is affecting our sensors." Parker fired again from a different position. Another alien fell. The remaining 3 warriors were panicking now, firing in all directions, but they could not see their enemy. "Contact," Parker reported over the radio. 2 down, 3 running. The 3 surviving aliens were indeed running, but they were running in the wrong direction. Instead of heading back to their main force, they were running deeper into the desert. The heat and confusion had destroyed their sense of direction. "Let them go," Morrison said. "The desert will take care of them." He was right. The 3 aliens ran for 20 minutes before collapsing from heat exhaustion. They were found 3 days later, cooked inside their armor. Word of the attack spread quickly through the alien army. The Kethver had lost their first warriors to an enemy they could not even see. Fear began to replace confidence. "How many humans are there?" asked Vexstar. Intelligence said maybe 100, replied Gregtel. But they could be wrong. "If there are 100 human warriors on this planet, and they all fight like ghosts, we could be in trouble," Vexstar said. Gregtal looked at his casualties report. 96 warriors down, and they had not even found the main human force. Yet the heat was killing his soldiers faster than enemy bullets. "Sir," said a communications officer, "we're getting reports of sensor ghosts all around our perimeter. The humans could be anywhere." What the aliens did not understand was that there were only 12 humans. But those 12 humans knew the desert like it was their home. They could move without being seen, strike without warning, and disappear. Like smoke, Rodriguez had moved to a new position on the south ridge. She could see a large group of aliens resting in whatever shade they could find. They looked exhausted, and several of them had removed their helmets despite the burning air. "Morrison," she whispered into her radio, "I've got a target-rich environment. About 30 aliens, all grouped together." "Take the shot," Morrison replied. Rodriguez aimed carefully and fired. The bullet hit an alien fuel tank, and the explosion killed 6 warriors instantly. The others scattered, but they were too tired and too hot to move quickly. "Another ghost attack," reported Vexstar. 6 more casualties. Gregtal was beginning to understand that this was not going to be the easy victory he had expected. The humans were not fighting like civilized warriors. They were fighting like the desert itself, invisible, deadly, and without mercy. "How many warriors do we have left?" he asked. 1,804, came the reply. "But sir, if this continues, we will lose more to the heat than to enemy action." Gregtal looked out at the shimmering desert. Somewhere out there, human ghosts were watching his every move. And the sun was still climbing higher. The sun reached its highest point in the sky, and the Sahara Desert became a furnace. The temperature climbed to 128 degrees, and the sand was hot enough to cook an egg. Even the rocks were burning to the touch. The air shimmered and danced with heat waves that made everything look like a dream. War Chief Gregtal stood inside his command pod, but even there the heat was unbearable. His cooling system was working at maximum power, but it was not enough. Sweat poured down his face and his breathing was heavy. If he was suffering inside his protected pod, he could only imagine what his warriors were going through outside. "Status." "Report," he demanded. Vexstar looked at his screen with worry. "We have lost 237 warriors to heat exhaustion. Another 150 are too weak to fight. The human ghosts have killed 23 more. 400 casualties," Gregtal said slowly. "And we have not even found their main force yet." "Sir," said the communications officer, "maybe we should retreat to the ships and wait for nightfall." Gregtal's claws extended in anger. "We do not retreat. We are Kethver. We have conquered worlds with temperatures much hotter than this." But that was not true, and everyone in the command pod knew it. The Kethver had never fought on a planet like Earth. Their armor was designed for space combat, not desert warfare. Their tactics were built for fighting in controlled environments. Not in a place where the very air could kill. Outside, the alien army was falling apart. Warriors were collapsing every few minutes. The medics were overwhelmed, and their cooling supplies were running low. Many soldiers had tried to remove their armor, but the desert sun burned their skin immediately. Warrior Kethjon sat in the shade of a large rock, his helmet off despite the danger. His face was purple with heat and his breathing was shallow. Next to him, Warrior Makrel was unconscious. The heat had finally defeated him. "This planet is cursed," Kethjon whispered. "The star is too bright, the air is too thin, the ground is too hot. The humans live here," said another warrior. "How do they survive?" "Maybe they are not really alive," Kethjon replied. "Maybe they are spirits of the desert." 2 miles away, Captain Morrison was quite alive and comfortable. He had found a cave that stayed cool even in the worst heat. He had plenty of water, and his desert gear was designed to keep him safe. He was watching the alien army through his binoculars, and what he saw made him smile. "Rodriguez, are you seeing this?" he asked into his radio. "I see it," came her voice. "They're dropping like flies. I count at least 50 aliens down just in my sector." Morrison could see aliens lying motionless in the sand. Some were trying to crawl toward shade. Others were sitting with their heads in their hands, completely defeated by the heat. A few were even trying to dig holes in the sand, but the effort was making them weaker. "Turner, how much longer until the temperature drops?" Morrison asked. 6 hours until sunset," replied Corporal Lisa Turner. "The heat will get worse before it gets better." "Perfect," Morrison said. "Blake, what's your position?" "I'm watching a group of about 40 aliens," came Sergeant Tony Blake's voice. "They're all bunched up around a single rock, fighting for shade. They look like they're ready to give up." "Hold your fire," Morrison ordered. "Let the desert do the work." But the desert was not Morrison's only weapon. He had been planning something special for the alien invaders. Something that would show them just how dangerous Earth could be. "Mendez, are you ready?" Morrison asked. "Ready and waiting," came the reply from Staff Sergeant Carlos Mendez. He was positioned near the alien supply depot, where they kept their water and cooling equipment. Morrison looked at the wind patterns. The air was still now, but that would change soon. Turner had predicted it perfectly. "Execute in 30 minutes." He said the alien supply depot was heavily guarded, but the guards were suffering just like everyone else. They stood in whatever shade they could find, their weapons hanging loose in their hands. They were watching for human attacks, but they were too tired and too hot to be effective. Mendez moved like a snake through the sand. He had been a commando for 10 years before joining this desert training program. He knew how to approach a target without being seen, how to plant explosives without making noise, how to escape before anyone knew he was there. The alien supplies were stored in metal containers that reflected the sun like mirrors. The containers were so hot that they glowed. Mendez could feel the heat through his gloves as he placed the small charges. The explosives were designed to look like rocks, so even if someone saw them, they would not know what they were. "Charges placed," Mendez reported, moving to safe distance. Morrison waited until the wind began to blow. It was a hot wind, but it would help spread what was about to happen. "Detonate," he ordered. The explosion was not large, but it was perfectly placed. The alien water supplies erupted in a geyser of steam. The cooling equipment exploded in a shower of sparks. The food stores burst into flames that burned even hotter than the desert sun. The aliens at the depot scattered, but they had nowhere to go. The explosion had destroyed their only relief from the heat. Now they were trapped in the desert with no water, no cooling, and no hope. "Direct hit," reported Mendez. "Their supply depot is gone." The news spread quickly through the alien army. The warriors who had been hoping for relief now knew that none was coming. They were on their own in a desert that was trying to kill them. "Sir," Vextar reported to his commander, "the supply depot has been destroyed. We have no water reserves, no cooling equipment, and no medical supplies." Greichtel felt fear for the first time in his military career. His army was dying, and he could not see the enemy. The humans were like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before anyone could react. "How many warriors can still fight?" he asked. "Maybe 800, Vextar replied. "But sir, they are all suffering from heat exhaustion. Even if we find the humans, I do not think we can defeat them." Gregtol looked at his tactical display. Red dots showed where his warriors had fallen. There were hundreds of them, scattered across the desert like fallen leaves. In just one day, he had lost more soldiers than in his last 5 campaigns combined. "The intelligence was wrong," he said quietly. "This is not a primitive planet. This is a death world." 3 miles away, Sergeant Ben Parker was preparing for his next strike. He had been watching a group of aliens who were trying to reach a small oasis. They did not know that the oasis was a mirage, a trick of the desert heat. They would walk for hours and find nothing but more sand. "Morrison, I have a group of 20 aliens chasing a mirage," Parker reported. "Should I take them?" "Out? Let them chase it," Morrison replied. "The desert will handle them." Parker was right. The 20 aliens walked for 3 hours, following what they thought was water. By the time they realized it was not real, they were lost and exhausted. Only 5 of them made it back to the main force. The others died in the sand, victims of the desert's cruel joke. As the afternoon wore on, the alien casualties mounted. The heat was relentless, and the humans struck whenever they saw an opportunity. Rodriguez picked off stragglers with her rifle. Turner used her knowledge of the desert to lead aliens into traps. Blake attacked supply convoys that were trying to bring relief to the front lines, but the desert itself was the greatest killer. By 4 o'clock, the alien army had lost over 600 warriors. Some had died from heat stroke. Others had died from dehydration. Many had simply collapsed and never gotten back up. "Sir," said a communications officer, "we are receiving distress signals from units all across the battlefield. They are requesting immediate evacuation." Gregtol knew that evacuation was not possible. The dropships could not land in this heat without risking their engines. The rescue shuttles were not designed for desert operations. His army was trapped. "Send a message to the fleet," he ordered. "Tell them we need orbital support. Bomb the entire area." "Sir, that will kill our own warriors," Vextar protested. "Our warriors are already dead," Gregtol replied. "At least this way we can take the humans with us." But even orbital bombardment would not be easy. The heat was affecting the targeting systems on the ships above. The desert was protecting the humans even from space. Captain Morrison received the intercepted message through his radio equipment. The aliens were planning to bomb the entire desert. It was a desperate move, but it might work. "All units," Morrison said into his radio, "prepare for orbital bombardment. Find the deepest cover you can. The aliens are about to turn this place into glass." The 12 human soldiers scattered across the desert looking for caves and deep ravines that might protect them from the attack. They had survived the heat, survived the alien ground forces, and now they would have to survive an attack from space. Morrison looked up at the sky. Soon, death would rain down from above, but he was not afraid. He had faced the desert for 3 months and learned its secrets. If anyone could survive what was coming, it would be him and his team. The desert had already claimed 600 alien lives. Now it would be tested by fire from the stars. The orbital bombardment never came. High above the desert, the alien fleet was having its own problems. The extreme heat rising from the Sahara created massive air currents that interfered with their targeting computers. The ship's sensors could not get a clear lock on anything below. Every time they tried to aim, the heat waves made their readings bounce around like crazy. "Sir," reported the fleet commander to War Chief Gregtol, "we cannot establish targeting solutions. The thermal interference is too strong. Any bombardment would be random and ineffective." Gregtol closed his eyes in defeat. Even his own ships were being beaten by this cursed planet. "Understood," he said quietly. On the ground, Captain Morrison heard the news through his intercepted communications. Stand down from bombardment alert, he told his team. Their own planet is protecting US. It was true. Earth itself seemed to be fighting against the invaders. The heat, the sand, the air currents, everything was working to destroy the alien army. Morrison had never seen anything like it. By evening, as the sun finally began to set, the alien casualties had reached 800 dead. Another 400 were too weak to fight. Of the original 2,000 HFY warriors, only 800 remained combat-ready, and even those were exhausted, dehydrated, and afraid. War Chief Gregtal looked at what remained of his mighty army. The warriors, who had conquered star systems, were now beaten and broken. Many of them could barely stand. Their armor was cracked from the heat. Their weapons were malfunctioning from sand and thermal stress. "We must retreat," said Vextar. "This mission is lost." "No," Gregtal replied with desperate anger. "We find the humans. We kill them all. Then we leave this hellworld forever." He gathered his remaining 800 warriors as the temperature finally began to drop. The cool evening air felt like heaven after the blazing day, but it was too late. The damage was done. His army was shattered. "Listen to me," Gregtal told his troops. "The humans are few. Maybe 50, maybe 100. We are still 800 strong. We will find them and end this." But finding the humans was still impossible. The 12 soldiers had vanished into the desert like smoke. They knew every hiding place, every cave, every shadow in this vast wasteland. The aliens stumbled around in the darkness, their night vision. Equipment struggling with the sand in the air. Morrison had chosen the battlefield carefully. There was a narrow canyon about 10 miles from the original landing site. The canyon walls were high and curved, creating a natural echo chamber. More importantly, when the sun rose the next day, those walls would turn the canyon into an oven. That would be even hotter than the open desert. "All units fall back to the canyon," Morrison ordered. "We make our stand there." The 12 humans moved through the night like shadows. They knew this desert better than any place on Earth, even in complete darkness. They could navigate by feel, by smell, by the sound of the wind through the rocks. Rodriguez reached the canyon first. She found a perfect sniper position on the north wall, hidden behind rocks, but with a clear view of the canyon floor. "Position secured," she reported. One by one, the other soldiers found their positions. Parker took the south wall. Turner and Blake positioned themselves at the narrow entrance to the canyon. Mendez set up his explosives at key points along the walls. Every soldier had a job, and every job was designed to turn the canyon into a death trap. "Remember," Morrison told his team, "we let them come to us. We let them get deep into the canyon. Then we closed the door behind them." The alien army spent the night searching for the humans. They found nothing but empty desert and the ghosts of their own dead. As dawn approached, Scout Velmer finally picked up human tracks leading toward the canyon. "Sir," he reported to Gregtal, "I have found their trail. They are heading west, toward the canyon system." Gregtal felt hope for the first time in 2 days. Finally. "How many tracks?" "It is hard to tell in the sand," Velmer replied, "but I estimate at least 50 humans, maybe more." This was exactly what Morrison had wanted. He had left obvious tracks, making it look like a large force was retreating to the canyon. The aliens would think they had found the main human army. "Prepare the warriors," Gregtal ordered. "We attack at dawn." As the sun rose over the Sahara, the temperature began to climb again. But this time, Morrison and his team were ready. They had water cached in the canyon. They had shade and cover. They had turned the desert's greatest weapon, the heat, into their own advantage. The alien army approached the canyon in formation. 800 warriors, all that remained of the mighty force that had landed 2 days ago. They moved slowly, their armor already heating up in the morning sun. "Contact," whispered Turner from her position at the canyon entrance. "I count 800 hostiles approaching from the east." Morrison felt his heart pounding. 12 humans against 800 aliens. The odds were impossible, but the terrain was perfect. "Wait for my signal," he said. The aliens entered the canyon single file, with Greigtoll leading from the front. The canyon walls rose 60 feet on both sides, and the floor was only 50 feet wide. It was the perfect place for an ambush, but Greigtoll was desperate. He needed to end this fight before the heat killed the rest of his army as more and more. Aliens entered the canyon. Morrison watched and waited. He needed them all inside before he sprung the trap. The canyon was 200 yards long, and he wanted every alien warrior trapped between the walls. 200 inside, reported Turner. 400 inside, reported Blake. 600 inside, reported Parker. Morrison waited until almost all of the alien force was in the canyon. Only the rear guard remained outside. "Close the door," he ordered. Mendez triggered the first set of explosives. The rocks at the canyon entrance collapsed in a thunderous roar, sealing the exit. The aliens in the rear were cut off from their main force. The 800 warriors in the canyon were trapped. "Now!" Morrison shouted. The battle began with a sound like thunder. 12 human weapons opened fire from the canyon walls. The aliens, packed together on the narrow canyon floor, could not spread out or take cover. They were sitting ducks. Rodriguez's rifle cracked again and again from her position on the north wall. Each shot found its target. Parker fired from the south, his bullets echoing off the canyon walls. The sound was deafening, and the aliens could not tell where the shots were coming from. "Return fire!" screamed Greigtoll, but his warriors were panicking. The canyon walls created echoes that made it impossible to locate the human shooters. The aliens fired their plasma weapons at empty air, the energy bolts sizzling against the rocks, but Morrison's greatest weapon was not the guns. It was the canyon itself. As the sun climbed higher, the canyon became a natural oven. The curved walls reflected the heat back and forth, making the temperature climb even faster than in the open desert. By 10 in the morning, the temperature in the canyon had reached 140 degrees. The aliens, trapped between the walls with nowhere to go, began to collapse from heat stroke. Their armor, which had been designed for space combat, became torture chambers in the desert heat. "I cannot breathe," gasped warrior Kethjun. He tried to remove his helmet, but the air outside was so hot it burned his lungs. "The walls are cooking us alive," said warrior Mackerel. He touched the canyon wall and jerked his hand back. The rock was hot enough to cause burns. Greigtoll realized that he had led his army into a trap. The humans had not retreated to the canyon. They had lured the aliens there. The canyon was a natural furnace, and the humans were using it to cook his warriors alive. "Retreat," he ordered. "Fall back to the entrance." But there was no entrance anymore. The collapsed rocks blocked the only way out. The aliens were trapped in a stone oven with no escape. Turner threw her grenades from the canyon rim. The explosions echoed like thunder, and falling rocks crushed dozens of aliens. Blake added his own grenades to the barrage. The aliens tried to climb the canyon walls, but the rocks were too hot to touch and too smooth to grip. As the temperature climbed past 145 degrees, the alien army began to disintegrate. Warriors were collapsing faster than their medics could help them. The narrow canyon floor was littered with unconscious aliens, their armor glowing with heat. "Sir," Vexstar said to his commander, "we must surrender. We cannot survive this." Greigtoll looked around at his dying army. In 3 days, 2,000 of the galaxy's greatest warriors had been reduced to a few hundred exhausted survivors. They had been defeated not by superior technology or greater numbers, but by a planet that refused to be conquered. "Surrender," he whispered. Then louder, "Surrender, we surrender." The shooting stopped. The canyon fell silent except for the sound of alien warriors gasping for breath. Morrison appeared on the canyon rim, looking down at the defeated army. "Drop your weapons," he called down. "All of them." The aliens had no choice. They were too weak to fight, too hot to think, too beaten to resist. They dropped their plasma rifles and energy weapons onto the burning sand. Morrison looked at the scene below. 800 aliens lay defeated in the canyon, victims of their own arrogance and Earth's merciless environment. Only 12 humans had been needed to destroy an army that had conquered worlds. "Rodriguez?" he said into his radio. "Signal for pickup. Tell them we have prisoners." The great alien invasion was over. The desert had won. The rescue helicopters arrived 6 hours later. Captain Morrison heard the sound of rotors cutting through the desert air and smiled for the first time in 3 days. He stood on the canyon rim, looking down at the defeated alien army below. Of the 800 aliens who had entered the canyon, only 200 were still alive. The rest had died from heat stroke, dehydration, or exhaustion. The survivors lay in whatever shade they could find, too weak to move, too broken to fight. War Chief Graktal was barely conscious. His dark armor had cracks running through it from the extreme heat. His breathing was shallow, and his eyes were unfocused. The greatest military commander in the Kethver Empire had been defeated by 12 humans and a desert. "This is Colonel Davis," came a voice over Morrison's radio. "We have medical teams and transport ready. What's your status?" "Mission accomplished," Morrison replied. "We have approximately 200 alien prisoners. They need immediate medical attention." "Copy that. We're sending down medics now." The human medical teams worked quickly to save the alien survivors. It was strange to see human doctors treating the same creatures who had come to destroy Earth. But Morrison understood why it was necessary. These survivors would carry a message back to their people. Dr. Sarah Martinez was the first medic to reach Graktal. She checked his vital signs and shook her head. "This one is in bad shape. Severe dehydration, heat stroke, possible organ damage." "How long has he been in this heat?" 3 days, Morrison replied. 3 days in the Sahara? Dr. Martinez looked amazed. "It's a miracle any of them are alive." As the aliens were loaded onto medical transports, Morrison gathered his team. All 12 soldiers had survived the battle, though they were tired and sunburned. They had accomplished something that would be remembered for generations. "Good work, everyone," Morrison said. "You just saved the world." "Did we really?" asked Rodriguez. "What if more of them come?" Morrison looked up at the sky, where alien ships still waited in orbit. "I don't think they will, not after this." He was right. High above Earth, the Kethver fleet was in chaos. The reports from the surface made no sense. 2,000 elite warriors defeated by 12 primitives, an entire army destroyed by weather. It seemed impossible. Admiral Zekthal read the battle. Reports over and over, but the facts remained the same. His greatest military force had been annihilated by a handful of humans and their planet's environment. The casualties were devastating, and the few survivors were broken both physically and mentally. "How is this possible?" he asked his advisors. "The Kethver are the finest warriors in the galaxy. How could they lose to primitive humans?" "Sir," said his intelligence officer, "perhaps our information about this planet was incomplete. Maybe the humans are not as primitive as we thought." "Or maybe this planet itself is a weapon," suggested another officer. "The surface temperatures alone would kill most of our species. And the humans live there naturally." Admiral Zekthal studied the tactical displays. The truth was becoming clear. Earth was not just another world to be conquered. It was a death world, a planet so hostile that it had created a species of natural survivors. The humans had not defeated his army with superior technology or numbers. They had used their own world as a weapon. "Recall all forces," he ordered. "We are withdrawing from this system." "Sir, what about the survivors on the surface?" Zekthal paused. Abandoning wounded warriors went against everything the Kethver believed in, but he could not risk losing more ships and soldiers to this cursed planet. "Arrange for a prisoner exchange," he said finally. "We will trade technology for our people." 2 weeks later, the exchange took place in Earth's orbit. The alien fleet provided medical technology and star charts in return for their surviving warriors. Of the original 2,000 soldiers, only 5 were healthy enough to return to duty. War Chief Graktal was among the survivors, but he was a changed warrior. The desert had broken something inside him that could never be repaired. He sat in the medical bay of his ship, staring at nothing, his mind still trapped in that burning canyon. "Commander," said his aide, "the Admiral wants your full report on the battle." Gregtel looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow, haunted by memories of sand and heat and dying warriors. "Tell him this," he said quietly. "The humans are not primitive. They are adapted. Their world has made them into something we cannot fight." "Sir, we thought we were invading a weak planet," Gregtel continued. "But Earth is not weak. It is the strongest world in the galaxy, and the humans are its children. They do not just live on that planet, they are part of it." The aide wrote down every word. This report would be studied by military strategists across the Kethver Empire. It would change how they viewed humanity forever. Back on Earth, the 12 soldiers who had saved the world were treated as heroes. They were given medals, promotions, and interviews with news reporters from around the globe. But Morrison and his team remained humble about their victory. "We didn't win because we were better soldiers," Morrison told a reporter. "We won because we knew the desert. The desert did most of the fighting for us." But how did you survive when the aliens couldn't?" the reporter asked. Morrison smiled. "Because this is our home. We've been living here for thousands of years. We learned to work with the environment instead of fighting against it." The story of the desert battle spread quickly across Earth. People called it the greatest military victory in human history. 12 soldiers against 2,000 aliens, and humanity had won. It gave people hope and pride in their species, but the story also spread beyond Earth. The Kethver were not the only alien species in the galaxy. Soon, every civilization knew about the humans and their deadly homeworld. They learned that Earth was not a target for conquest, it was a place to be avoided. Scout Velmer, one of the 5 surviving aliens, wrote his own report when he returned home. "The humans call their world Earth," he wrote. "But they should call it hell. The very air burns your lungs. The ground cooks your feet. The star above tries to kill you every moment of every day. And the humans live there happily." He continued, "We thought we were fighting primitives, but we were fighting the children of a death world. They are not just adapted to survive in impossible conditions, they are weapons created by their environment. Every human is a soldier trained by the harshest world in the galaxy." Engineer Mockrell, another survivor, had nightmares about sand and heat for years after returning home. In his dreams, he was always back in that canyon, watching his fellow warriors collapse from the killing heat. "Earth fights back," he would tell anyone who would listen. "The planet itself is alive and angry." The war that was supposed to last a week had ended in 3 days. The invasion that was supposed to conquer Earth had instead taught the galaxy a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a species that calls a death world home. Years later, when other alien races discovered Earth, they approached with respect instead of conquest. They had heard the stories of the desert battle. They knew that humans were not primitive. They were survivors of the ultimate trial by fire. Captain Morrison retired from the military and returned to the Sahara Desert. He built a small research station where the alien army had first landed. Sometimes when the wind was right, he could almost hear the echoes of that 3-day battle that changed everything. The desert looked the same as always, empty, hostile, and beautiful in its own deadly way. But Morrison knew the truth. The Sahara was not just a desert. It was Earth's greatest guardian, a natural fortress that had protected humanity when they needed it most, and somewhere in the vast galaxy, alien civilizations marked Earth on their star charts with a simple warning: Death World. Inhabited by survivors, approach with extreme caution. The desert had taught the universe to respect humanity, and that lesson would never be forgotten.